Further south, another explosion has torn through a second Japanese nuclear reactor today, as we heard before. It's heightened fears that 2 reactors in the Fukushima nuclear complex have at least partially melted down. Authorities have already evacuated more than 200,000 people, though they insist there have only been small releases of radiation. Even so, the emergency sparked fresh worldwide debate about the safety of nuclear energy, as Matt Peacock reports.
As the days residents of the Japanese coastal areas worst hit by the massive earthquake and tsunami began to pick through the wreckage, Japanese authorities face yet another challenge. Declaring a nuclear emergency, the government warned that partial meltdowns could be underway inside 2 nuclear reactors, a mere 240 kilometres north of Tokyo.
It's very bad. It's a situation where over 200,000 people have been relocated, and where the Prime Minister of Japan has described this situation as the gravest threat and crisis facing the country since World War II.
I think forming conclusions at this stage of the developments in the Japanese situation is clearly premature. We've had 55 reactors, all of whom are behaving properly except potentially for 2, which have been subjected to the most extreme forces of nature.
But earlier today, an apparent hydrogen explosion tore through a second Fukushima reactor suspected of melting down. The explosion came despite continuing efforts of authorities to cool both of the superhot cores by pumping in seawater. That's a measure acknowledged by Australian nuclear physicist Dr. ZIGGY SWITKOWSKI to be a last resort.
Once you flood the core with seawater, that's a relatively desperate act. But on balance, the authorities have decided that it's much more important to ensure that the core is in control and that the future of the reactor is an issue for a later time.
Despite government assurances the reactor cores have not been breached, a 20-kilometre evacuation zone's been declared around the stricken reactors as emergency workers test those who may already have been contaminated with radiation. Iodine tablets have also been distributed, with those still in the area ordered indoors.
We know that there have been some people who've been contaminated. We know that, for example, in the control room of one of the plants, Fukushima 1, radiation levels were reported to increase up to 1,000 times normal. We know that high levels have been measured outside the plants.
It's the second explosion to occur in the Fukushima reactor complex. A day after the earthquake and tsunami, this explosion ripped away the outer roof and part of the walls of its number 1 reactor. Radiation detected outside the plant, according to Melbourne University's Professor TILMAN RUFF, may mean that at least part of the nuclear core has been exposed.
What we know from the leakage of iodine and cesium is that they come from inside reactor cores, so that there has been a breach of the reactor core.
Working normally, the reactors produce heat from uranium fuel rods, which turn water, shown in blue, into steam. When the earthquake hit, nuclear fission was shut down by the grey control rods that automatically moved into the chamber. But nuclear ions continued to heat, and when the tsunami washed out backup diesel generators, only a few hours of battery power remained to pump the cooling water in before the reactors began to overheat. A full nuclear meltdown could have catastrophic results across what is one of the most densely populated areas on the planet.
It's a little bit like the element in an electric kettle. If you keep topping up the water, it can keep running. If you let the water run down, that element keeps running, and sooner or later it superheats and it blows.
Anti-nuclear activists like the Australian Conservation Foundation's Dave SWEENY warn that the company operating the overheating reactors, TEPCO, has a history of deceit.
5 senior directors of this company, TEPCO, have had to resign in recent years over falsifying safety data, and 2 of the reactors that they falsified safety data at were the ones that are currently the problem in Japan.
Japan's nuclear agency ranks this as a Category 4 nuclear accident, below the 1979 Three Mile Island partial meltdown in the US, and well below the Chernobyl meltdown and explosion 25 years ago, which rated top of the scale at 7. That was the world's worst nuclear disaster to date, scattering a radioactive cloud over millions of people in Russia and Europe.
Really the only thing that seems to be between us and a major catastrophe is that there hasn't as yet apparently been a major breach of the primary containment vessel, the big stainless steel pot that the reactors sit in. If that happens, then we're looking at a Chernobyl-type disaster or worse. Now, so far that doesn't seem to have happened, but everything else up to that point seems to have failed.
Already around the world, in France, Spain, the United States and even China, concerns about the safety of nuclear energy have been raised in the wake of the Japanese emergency.
No other industry poses this range of risks, and the containment structure at Fukushima might hold, and I hope it does, but the credibility structure of the international nuclear industry has been severely dented. It's not clean, it's not green, it's not safe, and it's not needed.
That's not, though, how the nuclear industry sees it, with Dr. SWITKOWSKI predicting that Japan will soon have its reactors under control.
I think the authorities have got much more urgent things to attend to than what the current nuclear challenge presents, because I think the difficulties with the 1, 2 or 3 reactors that are at the moment taking up all of the time will be progressively confronted and overcome, I would think, in the days ahead.
Matt Peacock there.